Everything out there right now is operated based on computers. Any device that transmits or receives is hackable. Case closed. So when you say you want to bring down, for example, power grid, power station, something like that, theoretically, what you have to bring down is the computer system. It's that simple. Actually, the internet itself was never designed with security in mind, ever. With the advent of AI and quantum computing, it's absolutely terrifying. AI will hack us in a way that we could never, ever imagine. There are so many vulnerabilities that we're not paying attention to. We are more exposed than most people can possibly imagine. We already have the Trojan horses on our shore.
Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. My guest today is a cybersecurity consultant with 30 years experience in the industry. I have a feeling I'm going to be feeling very stupid by the end of this. He has 2 bachelor degrees in electrical engineering and computer science, a master's degree in information security and cyber security. And he didn't want me to say this, but he also was a PhD candidate in cyber warfare. And I'm pretty sure he's already hacked into my computer. So welcome aboard, sir. And you are going by the alias today, Cassandra. And I presume that is from the Cassandra complex with the Trojan horse. Can you maybe just fill us in on that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me, Nate. Big fan of yours and appreciate all the work you do. It's amazing. You and your crew just doing an amazing job. Yeah, Cassandra was a Trojan princess, the daughter of Priam, the king of Troy. And she was gifted by Apollo the gift of foresight and prophecy. However, he also cursed her that nobody would listen to her prophecies. So the curse, she would live her life basically telling people of the impending disasters and just nobody would listen. And she told her dad, don't let that wooden horse into Troy. And of course, he didn't listen. So it became synonymous with people that basically forewarn people about problems like prepping. Yet, unfortunately, normalcy bias takes over and people just think, or optimism bias, they think everything will be just fine in the future. So based on my experience in life, I decided that an acronym as, or an avatar as Cassandra would be suitable for the story of cybersecurity and prepping.
And it's true that you had this handle before Michael Burry, the famous investor.
Absolutely. I was using it way before Michael Burry.
Yeah, so we got tons of stuff to cover today. I mean, there's so much going on in the world. We're going to go all over the map. We're going to talk about World War III. We're going to talk about why preppers need to focus on cyber security and make it a part of their planning. And typically, preparedness and self-reliance is a very analog process, like a lot of self-reliance endeavors. Obviously, when we're talking about just the sustenance of life, you know, these sort of things related to computers and technology don't really get their due process when it comes into factoring into our preparedness plan. So I know you have a lot of great metaphors to explain these things, and it's a very difficult conversation to initiate. I know we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, so I would encourage people to just sit tight and buckle up because I don't know if we're going to leave any stones unturned here. But where do you think is a good place to start? Like, let's just talk about what is cybersecurity in your...
Excellent point. I'd love that as a starting point, and from there, sort of let it flow to the reality that we're living and how that's related. Cybersecurity in any information security text is defined as basically the preservations of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of a computer system and information. What does that mean? Confidentiality, it means you do not allow an unauthorized person to access that data. So it's authorized access only. That's confidentiality. Integrity is to make sure that the data is complete and wholesome. It has not been tampered with in any way, shape, or form. And availability, meaning you can access the resource or the data at any time you want. The acronym, which is very famous, is CIA, right? Confidentiality, integrity, availability. Of course, now modern texts add to it authentication, basically verification of the person. They add to it a non-repudiation, which means you did it and there's no way you could deny it. There are ways of, forensically doing that. And of course, other availability, reliability. I mean, there are many things you add to it, but CIA, that's the core competency of cybersecurity. The problem is nowadays is there's a huge, I think, intellectual gap between understanding cybersecurity and physical security. And the concept that I like, which is I call total security. Let me explain. So, for example, when you have a lock on your door at home, that's a security layer, right? So your objective there is to protect your privacy, to protect your valuables, to protect yourself, right? So it's security and privacy is the reason you have a door and you have a lock. Right? So there, the assumption is that physical layer of security is going to protect you, privacy, assets, so on and so forth. But nowadays, with the digital world, a bad guy doesn't need to go through your front door. He could be parked right outside. So now you have, let's talk about the digital security or the cybersecurity. In the past, the physical security was the only security. Right now, if you have a bad guy outside, or they don't even have to be outside, they could be in a different country. They could access your IoT cameras in your house. So turning a security device into basically a disadvantage against you, into a vulnerability.
Just so for clarification, IoT, is that Internet of Things?
Oh yeah. Well, we like to call it the Internet of Threats, but it's it's Internet of Things. It's a term. And IoT right now is one of the fastest growing category of devices. Just to give you an idea, in 2013, I think, or 2011, I'm sorry, there was maybe 1 billion devices globally. Okay, globally. By 2025, it's projected to have 30 billion. Okay. By 2021, we had already 10 billion. So you're talking about a growth that is astronomical, right? And the IoT is basically our devices like cameras. We have them all around the house, right? Cameras, sometimes your coffee machine, your anything.
Car, fridge.
And they're connected. Yep. Fridge. I mean, nowadays, almost everything has some sort of a connectivity element to it, vis-a-vis your Wi-Fi or vis-a-vis Bluetooth or, different type of communication packages. However, the problem with IoT in particular is their security parameters are so low that if you are out, if you're a bad guy, right, your house, you might as well just leave your door wide open and unlocked and just, put a welcome sign outside. IoT security is one of the biggest concerns today because these devices are an integral part of our life, yet the security is lacking in a massive way. And people are unaware that these things are Trojan horses that could impact their life. A camera system in your house. Sometimes you have these baby little, the radios where the parents could hear the baby crying or something like that. And if you sit down and you add, Deloitte conducted a research in 2019, and they said that the average person has about 15 different devices in their homes, or that's the average. Right by 2021, that number from 2019 to 2021, that number jumped to 25. So each individual has about 25 different devices in their, let's call it digital ecology, right? Basically, if you're in your home, the concept of a closed door no longer applies as your security because that person could get into your camera system. They could watch what you're doing. They could hack your camera on your computer. They could watch your keystrokes. They could put a keylogger and follow everything that you're doing. It's endless. I mean, there's a famous hacking story of a famous casino. I'm not going to mention the name, where the hackers were able to access the high rollers database vis-a-vis hacking the Bluetooth thermometer on a fish tank. So think about it. Casinos have some of the best security in the world, but it takes one little Achilles heel. Yeah, one chink in the armor, one Achilles heel. And this is the problem is, so these guys were able to penetrate a thermometer on a fish tank. And that led them to the high roller database, which is extremely valuable, obviously, for casinos. And that's just a very simple example of how things we're not aware of our surroundings. So here, I'd like to talk about the concept of digital ecology and the relationship between physical security and cybersecurity. So when you have a phone, An ecology, by definition, is the study of an organism individually, in a group, in a community, or within the biosphere and the ecosystem. So it's a different scale. So it studies them on the individual level and the interaction with the grouping, regardless of the size and the grouping, and the physical environment. The same thing applies to digital ecology, where every artifact is a device, and it could be an artifact, could be a hardware, could be a software, because sometimes you have your phone, for example, right? And that's one piece of hardware, but it could have on it 20 different active apps and softwares that are collecting data, transmitting data, all sort of things. So when you look and you add up, let's talk about these 25 devices in a household, for example. Each device has its own ecology, and your house becomes an ecosystem. Your neighborhood is a digital ecology that's bigger, the city, and so on and so forth. Now, when you add another layer of complexity to this, which is the fast growth of connectivity. Give you an example. 4G has 100,000 device per kilometer density. So you could have 100,000 devices within 1 square kilometer, and 4G technology will support that. 5G supports 1 million devices per square kilometer. Wow. And 5G is 100 times faster than 4G. Now you get to 6G. 6G is 50 times faster than 5G and accommodates 10 to the 7, which is 10 million devices per square kilometer. So here you have what they call device density that is, and Bruce Schneier call it technology intensity, where you have so many devices in a small area that you have created an interdependent ecology that nobody could calculate. It's almost mathematically impossible to calculate the different interaction ecology, because I don't want to get too technical, but when a device has its own ecology and it's in touch with another device that has its own ecology, there's something called the interaction ecology, and the technologies become cumulative. And so would the flaws and the vulnerabilities. So you could imagine in a 10 million device square kilometer, and you might say, well, that's not applicable everywhere. True, but go to Tokyo and you'll see that. Yeah. So what happens is you've just created what's an attack surface. An attack surface, just to define it, is the total surface area of a network that a hacker could use to penetrate or to attack, right? So now you've taken a small problem, let's call it one phone, for example, that a hacker could have access to, and you've just given them technically or theoretically 10 million devices in a very small area that they could hack and then hop skip from one to the other potentially. Because most of these things, there's what they call mono technologies, right? Or they have what's called homogeneous technology. So most of these, let's say phones, for example, well, you're operating either Android or Mac for the most part, right? PCs, well, you're operating Windows or you're operating Mac, right? So that makes it's almost like in livestock, where the more monoculture or agriculture, the more monoculture, the more susceptible they are to disease. So it's a hacker's dream. It's a hacker's dream, and it will just burn through like wildfire. And then you take that and you just amplify it into a city, amplify it into a country, amplify it into a continent, and now understand the choke points that these complex systems have, which is the bandwidth, the nodes, the power grid. And what you have is you're sitting on a powder keg that basically, with the advent of AI and quantum computing, which we could get to at some point, it's absolutely terrifying what could happen, the magnitude of the problem versus the available resources as a solution. It's a David and Goliath. It's not even close, And that's why I think in terms of the prepping community, it's so important that people realize that nowadays the old let's put it this way, the misunderstanding of cyber as being something on the internet that has nothing to do with me, and I'm okay because I have my door locked. That misnomer is completely out of the window. It just does not exist in reality. Because right now, your hybrid security or total security. It means your physical security and your digital security are equally important. And I'll give you an example of that. A lot of people go in and they feel, well, I'm just going to put one of these electronic locks. Well, you just took a physical security and turned it into a digital security. So now I don't have to get a crowbar. I just have to know how to hack that door. And the saddest part of this, if you go to any of the electronic conventions around the world, most of the security schemes and the drawings for these IoT devices are available by the manufacturers. So it's like, give you an example where, thieves that steal safes, right? They go to the manufacturers and they get the drawings for the safe and they know exactly how to access that safe. So the security of IoT, the availability of information is what makes it scary, because that lock that you think is protecting your home, that I would bet you anything, if you run a search, you'll be able to find the drawings online somewhere, and you'll be able to hack it. And if not, you'll be able to find a resource on the darknet to get it, right? So you are under the illusion your door is locked. You're under the illusion that your cameras are providing you security. But in reality, they could be turned completely against you.
They're a vulnerability at the same time.
It's a Trojan horse. It's a Trojan horse. And people in the digital, we're still almost children in the digital world yet. For example, in terms of prepping and security, social media is one of the biggest blessings in a certain way, but one of the big security threats in another. For example, somebody on a vacation with his family and he's just, posting pictures. I'm on this 3-week vacation in Aruba, right? Some bad guy say, thank you for the tip. Now I know the entire family's in Aruba for 3 weeks. And by the way, let me find out, I found your name. Okay, let me Google. Okay, I found you through some databases. Okay, let me find where your house. Okay, here's the IP. Great. Now I know exactly what alarm system you have. I know what cameras you have. I know where you live. And you posted some videos about your home. Oh, look at that. That's where you keep even your car keys. Thanks a lot. It's mind-boggling where people, inherently are good. So they don't think that somebody would do this to them because they're thinking, I wouldn't do it to somebody else. And that's the normal human nature, right? But the bad guys are sitting looking at this as a treasure trove of criminal enterprise opportunities. Before the show, I was just reading one of the normal articles I read in cybersecurity, and I was blown away that the World Economic Forum this year, their assessments, they're talking about cybercrime becoming a $10 trillion industry. That makes them the third largest economy on earth after China and the US. Think about it. $10 trillion is cybercrime. I think in 2015, it was 3 trillion. In 2017 or 18, it became 6 trillion. And by 2030, 2025, they're expecting it to be 10 trillion. That is more than the entire drug industry. You name it, 10 trillion, you're the third largest economy in the world.
Yet, well, that would make sense that would make sense because a lot of crime now has been nullified by technology. Like, it's not as easy to steal a car. You can't hotwire a car anymore. So now organized criminals have to get, once they start, becoming aware of this space. Or maybe you can, maybe you still can't.
actually, I have to push back a little bit on this one.
Okay.
Actually,
maybe that was a bad example.
It's much easier to steal a car now.
Okay, yeah.
Especially a nice Tesla like yours.
I know we're going to talk about the Cybertruck at some point throughout this video. But sorry, go ahead. Continue with what you were saying.
No, so in essence, what right now in the security industry we have a saying. We say information is the new oil, right? And the abundance of information that's out there, the complexity, the interdependency between these digital ecologies of devices, yet they are so dependent on homogeneous operating systems that most of these softwares and IoTs are designed with no security in mind. That's not a priority in software design. Actually, the internet itself was never designed with security in mind, ever. So what you have is globally, the growth rate is so rapid that we have not caught up yet with what it means to us as a society, as an individual, and how to take security as an important feature, because we assume that since I lock my door, somehow I am digitally secured. That's why in the prepping world, I think, and in every, not just the prepping world, anybody that's concerned about their security and their family's security and their valuables, is they have to think about both the physical and the digital. And I don't like the term cyber, and I hope they change it in the future, because it gives the false impression that this is just online. In reality, any device that transmits or receives is hackable. Case closed. It's just a matter of time, resources, and it doesn't matter how sophisticated you are. It's just a matter of time, resources, and somebody wanting to do it. And let me tell you, there are some very talented people out there. But even that is changing. The hackers of old, and I'm aging myself, were super programmers. I mean, these guys were coders extraordinaire. And Steve Jobs used to have a famous saying, is that, let's say, the difference between a good cab driver and a bad cab driver could be 2 times or 3 times, right? But the difference between a good computer programmer and a great computer programmer could be 100 times differential, right? So when you have in the past, you have to have really talented programmers. Now they have what's called script kiddies. And what's a script kiddie? You could go to a convention somewhere, right? And it's like a buffet of hacking tools, literally. And it has a dashboard. You could pick, well, what kind of malware do you want? What kind of hacking services? And I mean, they have hacking services on the dark net for hire. They have software packages that are designed to hack, especially for DDoS and whatnot. And we'll get to that and denial of service. So nowadays, you don't have to be a programmer at all. You could buy a ready kit with an easy to use dashboard that will guide you through it. Of course, it's illegal unless you're doing it as a white hat or part of a penetration testing organization or something like that. But just be mindful. This stuff is not something you go and you do. You'll be asking for a world of trouble, especially with the North American laws and the EU laws. The EU laws are probably the strictest in the world about this stuff, and rightfully so. But what I'm saying is the threshold for bad guys, where we used to think that, oh, you have to be a great programmer, those days are gone. Now,
anybody can buy a
lock. With very little experience could do it.
Anybody can buy a lockpick set nowadays, is what you're saying.
Exactly. And on the dark net, you could find anything you're looking for, and it doesn't even have to be the dark net. Just go to any of these electronic conventions in any of the big countries that have these huge conventions, whether it's China, whether it's Las Vegas, whether it's Barcelona, whatever, and you will be just blown away by how readily available these hacking packages and how most of the IoT devices that we buy are really sitting ducks, and they're Trojan horse that basically make our life convenient. And throughout this conversation, you're going to hear me always talk about the contrast between convenience and security, because that's always going to be, a physical lock requires physical action, right? So it's inconvenient per se, but it provides you higher level of security. An electronic car, remote car key, very convenient, but it provides a huge attack threat for any bad guy to just basically copy it or hack it and go in. So there's always a trade-off between convenience and security. A password that's 4 digits is easy to remember. A password that's 24 digits, it's hard to remember, but the 24 digits is a lot stronger than the 4. So that's always going to be a trade-off.
This is very fascinating, and your metaphor of digital ecology just got me thinking about how we're becoming more integrated with our devices, like, as a lot of people talk about the Borg or like the cyborgs, and as technology, this internet, the Internet of Things, as it becomes more dense, and as these devices come closer to us, whether it's in what they call wearable technology, I can think of so many devices, and I actually did a video on this years ago, where I basically do a rundown of all the various devices that are in your home, from like wearable smartwatches to smart glasses to, and as the technology becomes closer to us, either in the virtual reality realm or, you know, our cars, our vacuum cleaners, the concept of the integrations and the interconnections being so voluminous, like the how you talked about how, okay, there's 10 million devices, but they're all kind of communicating with each other. And I for me, to help conceptualize that, I would almost view it as like a bunch of neurons. And you might have, like, let's say theoretically 1 billion neurons in your brain, but the synapses that connect all these, the connecting tissue between all of them is in the trillions. So
exactly.
Am I safe to presume then that the vulnerabilities are in the trillions because you can hack into one of those synapses, which will allow you a pathway into the billions of neurons? Is that
excellent point? When we started the conversation, we're talking about attack surface, and I defined attack surface as the total network surface that a hacker could leverage to gain access or hack a system. So the more devices we have, the bigger the digital ecology, the bigger the attack surface. And in professional talk, it's a system element, right? So the more system elements you have, the bigger and the more unwieldy the attack surface becomes. Add to that, if you have an ecology of, let's say, 10 million devices, in reality, you have an ecology that's 10 to the unknown, and I'll tell you why. When two devices interact, now they form what they call an interaction ecology that is separate than their individual ecologies, right? And these technologies are cumulative. So if you have 50 devices communicating with each other from different ecologies, let's say your Wi-Fi and your neighbor's Wi-Fi, now you need a supercomputer to calculate all the ecologies that are interacting with one another. What does that mean? So the neurons and the nerve system example is an excellent system because it is that complex. And that's why quantum computing in the future is going to change the world, because it's designed specifically for these type of calculations that normal supercomputers cannot do. And then you bring in AI, and that's just opening Pandora's box, because AI could hack 1 million systems simultaneously. So you don't need one person sitting out there trying to hack your house. That AI software is simultaneously going everywhere and attacking in all over the planet. So we are more exposed and more vulnerable than most people can possibly imagine. And that's why cybercrime is a big concern. Cyber war could be existential. And we have not intellectually bridged that gap between physical security and digital security, and how the fact that the line between the two has been blurred to a point where it's almost irrelevant. And this is how cybersecurity professionals out there, they're able to identify somebody online, even if you don't use your name and password, your user ID or your information or your photo. You have a unique electronic thumbprint by the way you use the net, and AI is able to recognize that. So they know who you are without you saying who you are, even if you travel, even if you do whatever, right? So the more complex a system, and remember, there's an inverse relationship between system complexity and resiliency. More complex the system is, the more prone it is to have a cascading failure point. And when you look at some of the brand corporations and the World Economic Forum research that they've done over what they call systemic cyber risk, the first thing that will strike you is there is no definition for systemic cyber risk. They're still coming up with definitions and everybody has their own, but there's no industry standard that says this is what a systemic cyber risk. The best thing they could come up with was to categorize it, to say one is an independent cyber risk. Let's say one company has a catastrophic cyber risk, or a grouping, let's say, a region, for example. And then what they call the cascading cyber event. And that is catastrophic because its implications across hardware, software, economy, military health is just unknown. It cannot be calculated. It just really cannot be calculated. So we are living in very precarious times.
In terms of how this might relate to critical infrastructure, and as preppers, we often, ruminate on how might cybersecurity compromise the grid or, the water system or whatever else. Everything is connected to the internet nowadays, from telecoms to the military to, like how might does the integration of these IoT devices, how is that going to factor into a critical infrastructure cyber attack? Like, can you give us some example of what this might look like when executed on a grand scale? Because you're talking about AI now having the ability to do the work of thousands of hackers with the stroke of a button. So I can only imagine that, we're going to talk about the movie Leave the World Behind, because I think it's a great reference point for people. But because from my mind, I'm always thinking, okay, like there's a limited amount of hackers out there, but you just got me thinking about, like, holy shit, you can have an AI simultaneously hack into like everybody's whatever car at the same time and cause total chaos. Like, once everybody has a Tesla, what's going to stop some, sophisticated nation state hacker group just, coordinating some mass attack on Teslas that's going to get them to stop or hit the brakes at the same time? Or, is that possible? And maybe just start with, how it would affect critical infrastructure. And if you want to go into more specific examples, that'd be great.
Well, I mean, I guess let's start with the definition of a hacker. A hacker in the old days was considered a person that is motivated either as a hacktivist, a criminal, terrorist, state actor, somebody who's a disgruntled employee. It's a finite, defined group of people, so to speak, who are hackers, and they're individuals. Now, a hacker isn't defined as an individual or a computer. So with the advent of AI, or what they call adversarial AI, to be specific, the hacking, and I'd like to spend a little bit of time on this because I don't want to lose my train of thought, and then I'll get to the infrastructure because you will see how bad it is. When AI played chess, AlphaGo.
AlphaGo?
Okay, I'm not AlphaGo. Alpha One, I think. AlphaGo was the Go version of the chess, and Go is a lot more complicated than chess. AI, what I wanted to say about adversarial AI, it is, Bruce Schneier has a very famous term about adversarial AI. It says AI will hack us in a way that we could never, ever imagine. So when AI started playing chess, what made it scary is not that it played chess and beat everybody. What made it scary is it played chess in ways we don't even understand how they're reaching their conclusions. So you have grandmasters looking at the AI chess programs, and they're wondering, how are they making this move? So in other words, AI invented a new way of playing chess. Now, how is that relevant? AI could invent new ways of hacking that we didn't even think about. AI could write its own code and improve its own code without any of the psychological biases that a normal programmer could have. Thus, it could write pure code in ways we can't even imagine. So in terms of their AI capabilities of hacking a system, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's anything, what is scary about it is called the Pandora's box approach, is we understand what it does, we just don't understand how the heck it does it. And that is a big concern. So if you unleash an AI, an adversarial AI, potentially it could hack, you could upload into it every single hack known to humanity, every single line of code that's been known to humanity. You could train it with large training sets using big data to basically learn how, and it will self-teach. This is the difference between a supercomputer and AI computers. It will self-teach here what to do and invent ways we could not think of, a la Pandora's box, and develop attack vectors that we don't even know about. So nobody really in the cybersecurity world could give you an absolute in terms of how devastating that could be. We have no idea, but it could be very bad. The Department of Defense in the US calls it alien hack, meaning we don't know where it came from or how it's being conducted. So back to your point about the infrastructure hacking, critical infrastructure. Let me just simplify it. If it's run by a computer, it's hackable. Okay. It's just a matter of time, resources, focus, and whatnot. And remember, most of these ICS or industrial control systems that govern most of the infrastructure, they have a lot of legacy systems, old systems, right? Where security was never really part of the design of these softwares. So I don't want to scare people, but from a theoretical point of view, it's definitely something that hackers could do and AI could do. And the more the older the system is, the more vulnerable it is. These old legacy systems, so to speak, because their softwares have not been updated in a long time, and that's another problem, is the old legacy ICS systems. So the impact could be unfathomable. I mean, that's the short answer, because when you look at, for example, the PG-13 movie, which is Leave the World Behind, I mean, that's the best case scenario. Because at the end of the movie, they still had water and electricity, right?
Somehow,
but if you attack the infrastructure, miraculously, I'm assuming every house had its own water pump and it had its own diesel generators, and But if you, the problem is whenever you have complexity, I go back to complexity and resilience. They are just completely inversely correlated. So when you have an infrastructure or a lifestyle that's so dependent on electricity, so dependent on the grid, so dependent on modern day technologies, when you talk about hacking the critical infrastructure, the cascading effect cannot really be calculated fully. But you have to assume you're going to go to your benchmark or below your benchmark. What does that mean? If you have your own water well, per se, right, in terms of resiliency, well, you technically think you have water, but you really don't have water if you don't have a manual pump, if you're going to be depending on the electrical system. Everything we own right now is power generated, power connected, technology dependent, and power dependent. So when you say critical infrastructure, it doesn't matter if it's you really just have to go after power. That's right. Because everything's run by power. That's really all what you have.
Right.
And I don't have to tell you, I think you've had some amazing guests on that talked about the unsatisfactory condition of our national infrastructure. I'm talking about the US, Canada, North America, and Western Europe, where you could definitely do a lot more than what we already have. I mean, it's very concerning. And I think there need to be serious budgets and serious resources and approached in a very serious manner to try to create resilience and redundancies in these systems. And right now, I'm not so sure we have that. And if the power grid goes down vis-a-vis a million and one things, I mean, you could almost, I mean, if you want to think about worst case scenario, you could think of a cyber attack, the caliber that the World Economic Forum is talking about and realistically talking about. They're not really fear-mongering. What they're talking about is extremely realistic. You could think of it as a non-attributable EMP. I mean, that's what a big scale cyber attack like the one that the World Economic Forum is talking about, because it has all the effects of an EMP per se. It could have all similar effects as an EMP, but there's no attribution. Attribution is always a big problem. You could speculate it's country A or country B, but in cybersecurity, accurate 100% attribution is a very difficult thing to achieve. And what makes it dangerous is a country A could make it look like country B attacked country C. So you could sow discourse, you could create problems. So.
And really, that is interestingly, you just got me thinking, the whole plot of the Terminator movies was Skynet was, it got Russia to attack the United States by, I think it did something that it convinced the Russians that we were firing our nukes. And so it just got me thinking that, well, you sub in Skynet for some other nation state who maybe wants to start a nuclear war. And I think one of the biggest threats with this non-ability to attribute is that you do strategic damage if you take down a nation's power grid. So they're left with a choice. Do we launch our nukes now, or do we wait while we're vulnerable? And so this is how it puts us at like the highest possible state of DEFCON, because immediately if our power grid is compromised by a cyber attack, we have to assume that another physical attack is coming. And so do we try to preempt that by blowing our wad, and so these things are all like interconnected. But could you maybe, and I don't know if you have an answer for this, and I don't want you to disclose any secrets or incriminate yourself or anything, but can you maybe give us an example of what a hack on a power grid would look like, how that would actually work? Like, how could you bring the power grid to a halt utilizing a hack?
Well, obviously, I'm not going to disclose how you do that.
No, but just so we have a tangible, because I think what we're talking about is obscure, right, for a lot of people, so they don't really understand.
Sure. Let me put it this way. Everything out there right now is operated based on computers. So when you say you want to bring down, for example, power grid, power station, something like that, theoretically, and I'm going to speak theoretically, what you have to bring down is the computer system. It's that simple. Because everything is controlled and managed by electronic devices or ICS, industrial control systems. There are huge examples. One of the biggest stories that you could look up at some point was the worm or virus Shamoon, which attacked Aramco in Saudi Arabia years back, if my memory serves correct.
What was it called?
If it was Shamoon, I think. And what it did, it was a variant of the Stuxnet. At least that's the civilian version that we have heard based on, but I could be wrong. I mean, I'm going off of years of memory. But my point is, it was discovered by accident by a programmer that was brought in as a cybersecurity expert. And she just happens to be so lucky that she was at the right place at the right time, where the hacker was actually in the system. And then she was able to identify that they're in, and oh my God, and basically this was one of the most critical parts of the refineries in Aramco. And if they disabled those safety valves, I think it was safety valves or pressure valves that they were disabling and resetting them, basically the pressure would build up so high and the valves that the alarms would not be triggered. And then, of course, that would lead to an explosion. And that was one of the most critical parts in that oil refinery. And has it gone off, it would have taken months to restore that big, huge facility. And this programmer, who is brilliant, discovered it. And she just happens to be at the right place at the right time to catch it. And then they were able to track back that it was actually from a Russian institute, academic institute, that modified Stuxnet. And they still don't understand how it got there. But obviously somebody was able to get it and put it there. Again, some of the details, I apologize to the audience if not accurate, but the story in general is absolutely happened in Aramco. And I think Shamoon is the name of the virus. But what I'm trying to say is, here, the hacker, to disable the entire oil facility, he went after the choke point. The choke point was certain operations, just like what the Houthis did, or nobody knows who did a few years back with the drone strike. And so in terms of power grid or in terms of a power station, it's just hacking the computers. It's really that simple, and it's really that basic, unfortunately. And that's why I think I'm one of those proponent of bringing in cybersecurity education to the masses in a massive way, starting from schools, first grade, second grade, third grade. I'm not an educator, so I don't know, but at the earliest possible opportunity where people learn about cybersecurity, learn about technology, and learn how to protect themselves, their loved one, and their infrastructure. Because right now we're dealing with legacy systems and mindsets from 20, 30 years ago when the internet was designed. Nobody was thinking about hackers. I mean, it was not, cybersecurity was not a concern. There are companies, by the way, that have always taken security seriously, like NASA. NASA is the gold standard in terms of security of software, security of. So here, also, there's a social aspect to all this. We're dependent on bringing technologies from across the seas, right? We don't know what Trojan horse are in there. We have no idea what Trojan horses are embedded in the hardware itself, right? So there are so many vulnerabilities that we're not paying attention to that I think we have to really, and it's painful, but we really need a holistic effort from government, schools, community to start to think about these things in a serious way and put an educational program that could help people understand, here's your best security hygienes to protect yourself. Okay, here's what you need to do. Because we are right now really at the very beginning of a huge transformation. I mean, these emergent technologies, what the World Economic Forum called emergent technologies or disruptive technologies, when you talk about the newest technologies that are out there, you're talking about blockchain, you're talking about cloud computing, quantum, crypto, you are really talking about enormous type of problems that we just begun to scratch the surface. And all this was designed with security not a priority. So for the bad guys, it's a bonanza. And that's what makes the situation right now so precarious. And as in defense, you're always a step behind. The advantage is always with the offensive team because they have plenty of time to plan, to put things together, to allocate resources, conduct recon, do everything they want. And then the poor defense has to, in a moment of time, stop what could be years of effort. And you really can't stop certain threats or certain vectors like social engineering. I mean, one of your guests, wonderful guest, Andrew Bustamante, but just imagine if this guy was conducting social engineering for corporate espionage. Good luck stopping it. Because all you need is one person to be able to get behind the firewall, to get behind the defensive lines, and an organization that had 5, 10, 20,000, 50,000 computers have been compromised by a single individual socially engineering an event with a desired outcome to penetrate that network. All he has to do is to convince one person in that company to say, please, honey, sweetie, whatever, take this USB card and stick it in your terminal and print something or email something to me. That's all he has to do.
And in a lot of cases,
it would be almost impossible to stop.
It would be worth getting a guy to go for a job interview and become a member of the team. Absolutely. And all just to do that one task of putting that USB drive in the
Listen,
computer.
Social engineering and insider attacks are the most difficult type to stop because you're dealing with human psychology. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
that's how you would get past the air gap systems as well.
That's right. That's exactly right. Because Stuxnet is one of the most brilliant pieces of code ever written, right? It attacked a system that was air gapped. Now, of course, nobody really knows the details of how it got there. But basically, at the end of the day, it was a USB card or a USB stick that somehow found its way over there. That was the final outcome. And there are many stories that how that happened, and it was brilliantly done, brilliantly written, and brilliantly executed. But yeah, you look somebody with a high skill set like and $1 million smile like Bustamante, and if you would put him into corporate espionage, in theory, of course, we're all talking here hypotheticals, but somebody with that sort of skill set, and your main goal is to penetrate an organization to get behind the defensive wall, I mean, the amount of damage he's capable of doing would be mind-boggling. So you could be spending hundreds of millions of dollars on security, and it's all for naught. Wow. So that's another issue and all the corporate training and corporate cultures in the world The asymmetry is what makes it, and I'm glad you brought that. The asymmetry of cyber warfare and cyber attacks is what makes it really, really scary. Because you don't need a budget to build an F-35. You don't need a budget to have aircraft carriers. You just need a couple of very good savant programmers and very limited resources. And asymmetrically, the amount of damage you could do is hard to fathom. I mean, North Korea, it's been well documented in the cybersecurity community. North Korea uses cyber attacks, cyber crimes, cyber ransoms, ransomware, all sort of malware to raise funds for the government. You could at your leisure at some time look up at the Bangladesh Central Bank hack, which was attributed to a North Korean group, and they almost got away with a huge, large sum. They got away with some, but so now you have state actors that of countries that are poor. They don't have the resources we have, but cybersecurity and hacking provides them with a huge advantage, and that's why AI becomes so relevant. When Putin was talking about he who masters AI or gets to it first is the equivalent of having weapons of mass destruction. Well, arguably, the resources you need to develop AI and the resources you need to have good hacking teams is minuscule compared to the might of our military industrial complex in terms of aircraft carriers, airplanes, satellites, and whatnot. And remember, all these things can be hacked. So, I remember talking to one of my professors in the old days, and he was running research in University of London. He was running research on security for vessels, for ships. And he was telling me how he was experimenting with trying to see how easy would it be to hack a ship and hijack it. He was working obviously as a pen tester, and he was writing a research paper about the security system for these ships. But in theory, a ship is a computer with a rudder. The modern ships, right? So those are the asymmetric aspects that people don't think about, that you have countries with very low budget or very low GDP and very poor standards of living, but they are capable of putting their limited resources into an asymmetric solution like hacking, like cyber warfare, and they're able to achieve things. Think about it. We don't know, like from that $6 trillion figure that they talked about in 2021, I think, or 2020, how much of that was going to the bad guys? I'm talking about like state actors. We don't know. We have no way, at least for us civilians, normal people, there is no way to track this. Where are the funds from these illicit activities going? Right? Are they going to the people that wish us harm? Are they going to the people that actually are working against us? Where's that money going? So in terms of budgeting, the budget that we're allocating for cybersecurity and to protecting our cyber domain and our cyber ecology, let's call it our cyber borders, is minuscule compared to the risk that we're undertaking. And we're investing in legacy systems that have reached their maximum return. Let's put it this way. And unfortunately, there needs to be a new way of approaching this. There needs to be a new way of thinking about this, because we are living in a world where asymmetry rules. And these technologies, quantum computing, AI, and robotics are going to change the world, are absolutely going to change the world. Because when you have a quantum computer, we talked about how AI could hack thousands, 10,000, 100,000, really unlimited based on your computer capacity or your computing power. When you introduce quantum computing to AI as a hacking or adversarial platform, nobody could predict what that could do. Because quantum computing operates at a speed that is completely different. Supercomputing operates based on math. Quantum computing operates based on physics, photon physics, qubits, or quantum mechanics, quantum bits, not digital bits, zeros and ones. An entirely new technology. And we're just scratching the surface. So if somebody's able, so you have to think about it almost as if it's a race for new Like you've heard about the race for the nuclear bomb, a new arms race where there was the race for the nuclear bomb after World War II between the Russians, the Chinese, and everybody else, right? Well, openly, you got people like Putin telling everybody openly, listen, he who achieves mastery of AI first, general AI, is going to change the world. Well, if you combine AI with quantum, I mean, it's like mathematically, it's hard to even envision what it could do because a quantum computer could do things that a normal computer could never touch.
It's a quantum leap.
Designed specifically. It is a quantum leap. It literally is a very good term. It's a quantum leap in computing.
And if that's the case, that
the potential it has.
Yeah, if that's the case, that this AI is so central to a nation's security, we can only imagine that any block budgets right now are likely fully committed to mastering AI. Like if it's going to be that critical to national security, you can only imagine that there's billions of dollars being poured into this that we don't even know about, like Manhattan Project level stuff.
You would imagine that, but I wonder if that's the case.
Well, was the Manhattan Project, was it at the time, I'm not sure if you know, but was it publicly disclosed that it was happening while it was happening, or was it only disclosed afterwards?
I'm pretty sure it was not. But the Manhattan Project, which is one of these incredible projects, I mean, it's a feat like what humans can do if they put all the resources together and cut out the bureaucracy. They could do amazing things. The problem right now, the reason there are huge differences, I think, in my own personal opinion, is we already have these IoTs on our shores. We already have the Trojan horses on our shore. So but that's my point. So what I'm trying to say is at that time, the Atlantic and the Pacific did the job for us. I mean, that was, God bless. But now, physical borders, I go back to the concept of physical security, physical borders, physical barriers, almost irrelevant to these type of technologies. And when you look at the capabilities of quantum computing and AI, once they're combined in a meaningful way, just to give you an example. Okay, so this is just to help people conceptualize what I'm talking about, right? So when you go online to CanadianPreparedness.com and you want to purchase an item, you're using a shopping basket or a shopping software that basically is operated based on what they call non-symmetric cryptography. Okay. Or it could have some symmetric keys, but usually, I mean, that's cryptography. You have non-symmetric and symmetric. Most of the online activities are non-symmetric. Okay. So all cryptography, current cryptography that we use in our e-commerce is math-based. Okay, so the whole concept of it is that it's a math problem that's hard to solve in a short period of time, and everything is math-based. Okay, if somebody has a quantum computer, which is physics-based, which operates at speed and does parallel computing that we can't even comprehend, and they're able to crack these mathematical problems and compromise the keys, the crypto keys. Theoretically, an adversary could, if you're able to crack the crypto keys of non-symmetric computing, or non-symmetric cryptography, you could crush the economy, the online economy. All of a sudden, everything that's based on that crypto is no longer valid. And in a worst case scenario, they might not even tell you. They might just go into the accounts and try to siphon whatever they could siphon. I mean, it's hard to predict what a bad guy is going to do, but it's not going to be good. The moment you normalize the use of these non-conventional assets, the world will never be the same.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.